I've had a few questions about using Ice Trap of Hollowness versus using regular Ice Trap, so I thought I'd take some time to make a paint representation of basically how these two traps work to give you just a use case for Ice Trap of Hollowness and a general idea of why I personally don't think it's the best option for bossing. So if we think about it this way, let's start with having a boss here. Let's say this is a boss, and then let's make sure that we fill this. Now, if this is the boss, when you're using regular Ice Trap, it's pretty easy to understand what we're doing here. You're going to throw the trap on top of the boss. This trap is going to explode. But as you're preloading, your traps aren't going to go to the same spot. So you're going to have some situations where your traps go to the left a little bit, some situations where they go to the right a little bit, some situations where they throw above your cursor, some situations where they go below your cursor. And since Ice Trap explodes in this whole radius, as you can see here, this is just the general depiction of what Ice Trap looks like, you never really have an issue where you're missing. But with Ice Trap of Hollowness, it's slightly different. Ice Trap of Hollowness has this ring in the middle, and this ring in the middle makes it so the enemies take no damage if they're inside that ring. So what'll happen is whenever you're throwing your trap, think about it this way. If I'm throwing my trap's now way bigger because of Ice Trap of Hollowness, but now I have this area in the middle where it's just not hitting whatsoever. So you're going to have situations where if a boss's hitbox isn't very big, or if a boss is moving around a lot, you're just going to be missing with your trap and doing 0 damage. Now, Ice Trap of Hollowness does have 17% added cold damage. This accounts for probably close to like 20% damage increase in PoB specifically, but you also have to think about the trade-off of potentially missing on these bosses as well. So let's talk about this in a deeper version than just throwing one trap on top of the boss. Obviously, if you're using Ice Trap of Hollowness, you know that this is happening. So you're going to try to account for it by making sure that you hit in the actual area that you're aiming to hit where the boss is going to take damage. So let's say now, instead of having your cursor directly at the boss, you're going to move your cursor down here more so the top of the ring is going to hit the boss. So in this case, your cursor is going to be down here. So you're going to hit the boss with the actual trap itself. The issue with this, though, makes it so whenever you're throwing traps now, you're going to have some situations where your traps go below your cursor and you're missing now. And I think you can start seeing the issue with this on bosses, is if your goal is to preload and, let's say, one-shot a boss, if you're in a situation where you're throwing your traps and your traps are going in random direction, well, not necessarily random, but in different directions around the boss, you're going to have constant situations where maybe sometimes it'll hit, like in this spot, but sometimes in other situations you're just completely missing, just based off of the randomness of how the traps cluster around targets. And even in some situations you'll have like this, where the trap may throw above the target, but then you're going to have, you know, that circle in the middle that misses. So this is kind of the situation that you run into, and the trade-off that Ice Trap of the Hollowness has. If you're fighting bosses, it's now much more tedious to hit them with a ton more traps. That's why personally I just think normal Ice Trap is better in these environments. You don't have to worry about accounting for randomness when throwing traps. You don't have to worry about accounting for the ring in the center, or you also don't have to worry about bosses moving. I think one of the most annoying things about Ice Trap of Hollowness is whenever you're fighting Exarch dashes to you if you're far enough away from it. And sometimes what'll happen is he'll dash to you fairly quickly, and if he dashes to you and goes towards the middle of your trap, all of those traps are missing now. So we have to think about this when using Ice Trap of Hollowness, but it doesn't necessarily mean Ice Trap of Hollowness is generally bad for everything. What Ice Trap of Hollowness is really, really good at is whenever you're trying to do things like breaches. Breaches are going to have mobs all over the place, right? You're going to have mobs that are just spawning around the character. So having something that's twice the size that hits the full screen makes it much easier to clear that. Same things with Legion. Legions are super hard to do on trap builds. You know, you aren't probably going to be able to clear full Legions on normal Ice Trap. But with Ice Trap of Hollowness, you can do it much easier. So that's really the use case for Ice Trap of Hollowness, is you want to be using it on environments that have large AoE instead of environments that you need the single target for. It does seem a little bit counterintuitive since Ice Trap of Hollowness does have more damage, But the main reason why Ice Trap of Hollowness has more damage is because of the added randomness that comes in with having the ring shape of Ice Trap instead of having the normal Ice Trap that hits in the full circle, on top of the tedious nature of having to aim it correctly. So that's basically my opinion on the two. I think normal Ice Trap is perfectly fine to use in all forms of the game. But if you want to move towards more higher AoE, higher clear needed content like legions or breaches or breach zones, things like that, then maybe you can go ahead and try out Ice Trap of Hollowness. But at the end of the day, it's still my opinion. So you should still take the time to actually do some research and use it yourself, especially if you are playing a trap build. If you want to play a trap build, I have my Ice Trap Occultist. It's what I used for League Start, got me through all of my watchstones, got me through all of my maps. And in the next couple of days, I'm going to be releasing a final update for that video, talking about gear progression and talking about the Wildwood Ascendancies for that build as well. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. And thanks for watching.